Cool. Well, welcome back to another Campfire Music Foundation interview. Today we are honored and lucky to have the one and only Dessa here with us. Incredibly talented artist, producer, writer, poet, kind of do it all. Yeah. And so we're here today to talk about how you make it work, how you make the business work, how what's working, what isn't, specifically around music streaming, what kind of challenges that presents to you in your career.
Yeah.
So just I guess right off the bat, how's streaming working for you?
Yeah, I think in some ways, whether it's like a long-term solution or not, I I don't count on a lot of revenue from streaming. I think for better and for ill, definitely the music that I release is more and more an advertisement, unfortunately, for something else, for a live show, maybe for a piece of merchandise. But I think increasingly people think of music as free or almost free. And, from the consumer side, like, I have Spotify on my phone. Do I get why there's an appeal to it? Yes, absolutely. Like, instantaneous access to this world of recorded music from, like, parts of the planet that I will never go, and from eras in which I couldn't be alive. Dope. And as a creator, the compensation model is just best to me. Yeah, so we've invented something phenomenal. Something phenomenal has happened to the way that people access music. I think there is a democratization of access, but there's also this unintended or not, this disincentivizing serious like headwind for the people who are making music. How do you make a living if you can't sell anything you make?
And so you obviously have a very diverse career. Is that partially because you have multiple revenue streams?
I think partly, yeah. But I admit, okay, so you and I today were at a conference all about policy and how our tax laws and the systems that we create as a society, as a government, like foster or frustrate the creative arts. I understand that, to be honest, a lot. I understand the systems of it a lot less than I understand the practice of it. It's like I'm good at saying, okay, if I'm planning a concert, I'm good at figuring out the deal, the business part, to figure out how to get everybody paid and how to structure a deal such that you're incentivized, right? That if a lot of people come, we both get a big cut. If not that many people come, okay, we've created a low-key cushion, and here's how the merch person is going to get it. But I don't understand it as well from like that political science vantage point. And I'm aware too, I've heard some people say the 100 years in which people could be compensated for recorded music was a really weird 100 years. It wasn't that way for most of human history. You got paid for performing live. And then we had this blip where there was records, and now that blip seems to have ended. I don't know what to make of that. I don't know how this moment of ours fits into the broader trends in time. But it does seem like there's still money being made on recorded music. It's just the musicians aren't making it.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not like people aren't paying for your music. I mean, you have tens of thousands of fans who listen to your music daily. But the issue is that the money that they're paying to listen to it isn't coming back to you.
But then you also have the tension, right, between the freemium and premium economies, which is to say sometimes they're paying not with money, but with attention.
Yeah.
So they're willing to be subjected to a series of advertisements in return to have access to my songs, which is the same way that most of us use YouTube. I will sit through and mute the first 15 seconds, but that's what I'm paying. That's my fare to ride that ride. So I think that the way that the attention economy intersects with the fiscal economy is complicated. And that area of dovetail where everybody's hoping that eventually this will pay something.
Yeah.
Is increasingly speculative.
Totally. Yeah. Was there ever a time where you could rely on your recorded music as a consistent revenue stream, or since you've been a musician? I mean, I know you kind of started your career at the early days of the digital music revolution.
Yeah.
Did CDs work better for you?
Yeah.
It does?
It's okay. Yes, good question. And I want to answer it two ways. One, it's really easy for me to bemoan how busted in a lot of ways it feels like the music industry is. Like, how is it you make a thing that people really like that somebody else says and you don't get sells and you don't get a piece of it? And at the same time, I realize also like there's so many, like I don't have it right now. I'm not gone. I don't have a day job. I think about as much as a pharmacist in a small town, which is amazing. Do you know what I mean? Like I'm not, you know, I'm stable fiscally. That's awesome.
Yeah.
It's huge.
A
So
lot of artists can say that.
you know what I mean? That in and of itself, I just want to, I don't want to position myself as a starving artist. I have roots as a starving, but I'm not now. But it's not because I feel like I've cracked some code in how exactly one like monetizes their music. Like you said, I think it is a product of the fact that I have developed myriad income streams, you know, so in some way, I mean, Sims and Dream will joke about it. It's just like none of us are musicians if that's the way you identified how you make money. Like all of us were traveling t-shirt salesmen. The only reason to buy the t-shirts because you like the song, if you don't buy the song, right? So yeah, I think on the last tour, I made most money at the merch booth, not from my brand new record, but far and away from dish towels.
Wow.
You know? And in one way it feels like, hey, cool, high five, we sold a bunch of dish towels. But on the other hand, it's like, I sold a bunch of dish towels. They're cool. They're clever. You know what I mean? They're tongue-in-cheek, I'm proud of them. But I don't know shit about dish towels. Like, that's not my field of expertise naturally. And so it would be nice to, it would be nice to do that because it's fun, not because that's the only way to keep your fingers in the dam, to keep the thing moving. But the other ways that I make money, you know, is I write sometimes. And to be totally frank, like I had one really good book deal, which provided me some of a year or two of like, I can take bigger risks with other stuff, you know? Did my publisher make money on that book? You know, super volatile industry, so I'm not a bestseller.
Yeah.
But I had one really good deal where it's like, okay, I've got the time to create more work. Yeah.
That's interesting. So, say you were starting your career today.
Yeah.
Do you think you could make it work?
It's interesting. I mean, your earlier question was like, were CDs ever a reliable source, or CDs or vinyl, you know, any physical format? Yeah, they were more reliable. But it's weird because I feel like in some ways, you know, my trajectory as a musician, I hope and I think as, you know, it's grown at the same time that physical music sales have fallen. So even if the line was like more, you know, it was tempered by that, right? But I remember when I started being terrified because I this my first proper full and I was pirated a couple days later or whatever by sites in Russia where you could get either buy the song or the whole record for 15 cents. And it felt like the sky was falling. It's like, why would anybody ever buy it from us if you could get it for 15 cents? And now, of course, 15 cents. Wow.
Whoa.
What a windfall. No, I tease. But like,
Stream? Wow.
wow. Yeah. But I remember that being like, oh no. You know, it was like the hull has been breached.
Yep.
So I was right on that cusp where like the musicians who've made it, I think to approximately my level, 4 years before me, were buying houses for their parents.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
great houses, no, but like that, like, Mom, you're not a renter. Like, I got you. That kind of housing. And so, yeah, in some ways, like, I probably was spared the huge heartbreak of watching the music industry crumble because I was arriving on the steaming ashes of it. It had already kind of toppled.
Yeah.
But I caught like that last 2 stories of decline.
Yeah.
What changes would you like to see to the way that artists are compensated for their work, the way that they're treated by the music industry in general?
Frank, that like some of this I have so few solutions to because you don't want to fault any one particular artist for finding a way to stay afloat and make their stuff. And at the same time, there's some systemic stuff that sucks that artists do participate in. So like the fact that one of the best ways to get paid from a song now is to have that song synced to a major car company or to a soda company,
Sort of placement.
like a big one.
Yeah.
I get that. And it's also like, I think a society as a whole, not just you working in the music industry or as a listener of music, and not just me as a maker and listener of music. All of society, I think, is best served when musicians are not beholden to either multinational conglomerates or to their governments, because musicians historically are a really great font of dissent. And if you are in the pocket of the organizations that you might otherwise criticize, that leaves everybody at a disadvantage. So in some ways it feels like we can't be salty if all the music sounds like jingles when the only people paying for it are soda companies.
Yeah. So what's been the motivation for you to remain independent throughout your career?
A lack of interest from major labels. I would say twofold. I mean, that's, if I had been 25, it's like I want to be careful because I do take it as a point of pride. And I also just have to check myself in that I was never in a position where a huge company was like, we love what you do. We want to compensate you very well for it and put you on great stages in front of people who will probably like you. I never had that, so I didn't have to turn it down.
Yeah.
I did meet once with the VP of like a very fancy label. But to be honest, my pride surged a little bit. The way that I was greeted, the first thing out of his mouth, it wasn't crass, but it had to do with the way I looked, and it didn't have to do with like a song that I wrote. And I just thought, I've always been at best ambivalent and more accurately distressed by how much attention is paid to him in our culture at large, the music industry in particular, and to women in the music industry in hyper particular. Beauty, awesome. Sex, yeah.
Exploitation, no.
Or to have either of those be the table stakes to participate. Like, hey, what if I'm not interested in those things? What if I want to be a musician in the different aesthetic where that doesn't leverage that? That's a harder game to play. And so I think that my pride, but also my interest in being self-directed. Like, a lot of the stuff that I do when I first explain it to someone, they're not, I like to swing big, and a lot of it, there isn't proof of concept that I've presented. Hey, I want to develop a symphonic concert based on brain science to try to follow. Like, that was a project that worked really well. So, like, commercially, that worked.
Yeah.
That's a hard pitch, because what the fuck are you talking about? Do you know what I mean? And that's not because, people are out to get me. That's just because I don't really know what you're talking about. I haven't seen that yet, so it's hard to throw my full weight of enthusiasm behind it. If I want to explore those ideas that don't seem like they're guaranteed to make money, I think a risk-averse funder, like a major label, is going to be, they want to know that what you're going to do now is going to work, because I see big evidence of that. And I like to jump lanes a lot, and I think it would be hard for me to tamp that down and heed the counsel of people telling me where to go. I'm just kind of too independent, I think, of spirit for.
One of the things I talked to Laserbeak about was that he felt like the quality of his music was affected by the economic realities of the marketplace and having to release more music just to stay on top of people's minds, which impacts the quality of it. Do you feel like the art you put out is impacted by economics and realities, etc., by the market itself, or do you feel like it comes from truly?
I've definitely felt that pressure.
Yeah.
I think for the most part, I've tried to meet it in other ways, which is maybe a strain of perfectionism that at some time has hamstrung me too. I've made less music than a lot of people who've been in the game as long as I have. So maybe I set that dial a little too tight, but for the most part, I've kept it pretty tight. I mean, I would say I do feel like, in a way, I actually enjoy it for as a product of streaming realities. I like that the lengths of songs. Like, I happen to like short songs, but I feel like outside of the pop genre, like, there's sort of an expectation usually that a pop song should be at least 3 minutes. And I've actually liked the fact that expectation, which I think was forged from, at least in part, the circumstantial truth of how much music you. And so now that we're less concerned with that, do you know what I mean? Like, what's a full length? I think people are a little bit game to be more flexible with that. Oh, it's 10 songs, they're all sort of short. They're not worried about, like, how is it going to look on my final.
Yeah. What about albums? How do you feel about releasing full-length albums in today's digital world? I know a lot of artists feel like the concept album is kind of gone. You feel that way? You feel like people, like, what's your uptake on some of those musicians' albums?
Yeah, I mean, I've also heard that. Yeah. And I tend to, I've never made concept albums in that way, so I tend to just believe the the testimony of the people who are reporting like, yo, it doesn't work. And obviously as a user, I can feel myself, advancing through a song. It doesn't catch me. I mean, I do that. You know? So I'm sympathetic to that. And at the same time, I guess that I was never particularly sanctimonious about an album as like a special quantum unit of music. Like I always thought like, ooh, when I remember I dated a guy who used to be an opera singer, and I had never heard the term song suites before, where they used to just, in art song, they would have like, hey, here's 3 songs that go together really well, or here's 4. And I love that. I'm a miniaturist at heart, so I like an EP, I guess, but I like those short collections. So I like the idea, however it's presented, of a work being scaled according to its merit and its intent, as opposed to the form factor of how it's presented.
Sure. Yeah. It's very interesting. So yeah.
What do you think? Like, I mean, when I think about concept albums, sometimes I think about like stuff that was slightly before, like the era of concept albums as being like slightly before my time. But then I do think of like Gina Gray and the rapper Gina Gray had this really cool album where it was a choose your own adventure. So depending on what you chose at the end of one song, you would then advance to one of 2 songs on the album as you develop, like as you determine.
Like,
yeah,
it was choose your own fortune books or whatever.
it's that. And so I thought that was so cool. I don't know if that would work as well in our environment now, where all the songs end up cannibalized on you might run across them in 1,000 different playlists and not in the package that the artist envisioned them.
So how much of your time you spend making art versus managing art and managing your brand and managing your business?
I would say that if we go by the clock, it varies for sure. But I'd say right now 10% and 90%. What laser being saying?
5 and 5. Right.
The same way?
Yeah. If that, yeah.
It's a lot. And in some ways, I feel like I found ways to find or insert some art into managing art too. I admit I was better at that a few years ago. Like Twitter, I hated social media for starting. I didn't want to do it. I was like, I'm not a photographer. Why would anyone want to go to Instagram to see what I take pictures of? I'm not good at that. I'm a musician, Now, I think also just like, if that's where I'm meeting people, or if that's what we're engaging, you know what I mean? Like, is there a way to turn what might otherwise be a relentless into something artistic, something artful?
I think it's great that artists have so much control over their own careers nowadays. But that being said, what would it look like for you to be able to spend more time on it?
Exactly that. I think the idea that artists have so much control of their careers is awesome, but their career really does control their art too.
Yeah. What would it look? Yeah, I mean, if streaming paid more, if you got more, would you be able to spend more time on your art? Do you think?
I do.
Yeah.
And in part, it's like streaming paid more. I think I'm parroting something that I've heard that resonates. It's true, but I can't let go.
Yeah.
Which is, there can be also, I think, a gendered way that streaming. There could be a gendered way that the decline and the disruption of the music industry due to licensed digital media, technology, and streaming affects women differently than men. Didn't affect me this way because I don't have a kid, but like when I think of the guys in Georgia when they had babies, very often I was with them, whether wives or the partners, were pregnant, because I was in the band with them. They were still on tour. And unless you really are making money, I think a lot of people who are pregnant are not trying to like hop in the van and share a van, at least in the later stages of pregnancy and in the early stages of after having had a kid, which very often falls differently. So the idea that you're kind of people can still and sometimes do write music and record music, but tour life is tough. It's tough on our body. You know what I mean? It's tough. It's not a great place usually for formal fans. The schedule is weird for meetings. So it affects women's careers if they want to have a family in a way that it doesn't always affect men's careers. Because if we were all making money off music that we had made and recorded that people could buy, then that passive income
Okay, 5 months in and thing.
but it's the primary way that you're earning is on the road, which is true for most people. You don't have that opportunity.
Yeah, there's no HR department for the music industry.
Mm-hmm.
There never has been.
Yeah.
And now there's not even a consistent revenue stream, like you say. It's so hard. So many artists have to live on the road just to sustain their careers. Not even make millions to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. What would get paid more for streaming pay from?
I mean, okay, so think a lot of my life is lived kind of without a clean partition between this is personal and this is professional and this is personal and this is my artist stuff. Like for me, it is sort of blurry together, and in part, like touring is a lifestyle that you don't do just professionally. It means your off hours are in Des Moines. Do you know what I mean? Like your body is still on the road, but you're not. Yeah, you're careful. And part of that I love being able to see the country. I love getting to kind of like, Peter Pan it for a while with friends and I think that if I were making more money streaming, I could be more strategic about when I tour. I could make there more money all around. I think not just how it would affect my lifestyle. I don't have super expensive tastes, so I don't know if it would affect it much. But I think about how it would affect the art. Like I would love right now. There are songs on my new record that are best done with 4 damn voices. It's 4-part harmonies. It's 4-part or 5-part vocal arrangement. I can't run around with that many singers.
So you just layer it yourself.
So I'm layering it myself. So here, you do the high part now. I'm gonna do the mid part. Then the next chorus, I'll do the low. You do the mid, and it'll feel as if we have all
6 singers. Yeah.
But I remember the first time when my manager, she knows the songs. She's seen a million shows, right? But the first time we had 4 voices on stage because I booked Lady Midnight, who is this great performer from Minnesota, to open for us. So I said, would you be game to sit in on 3 songs during my set, the ones that need a long voice? She was like, yeah, I got you. So the first time she came up, and my manager just went, she's seen these songs every day. And it was like sweet to see her turn and go during sound check, what's that? I want 4. She just looked at me and goes, I want 4 voices every night. And it made me feel good to hear my arrangements, and it made me so sad that the difference was apparently that big, even not to my ear, that she, who's busy working and counting merch, turned around and went, that's so much better than last night. I don't want that every night. I'd love to add more strings. I would love to tour with more players. I would love to do lights. I would love to do costumes. I would love to take risks.
Yeah.
That takes money.
Yeah. How do you think that we as a society value music right now?
We're not getting a grade. We're not getting a report card with any vowels on it.
Yeah.
Like, I think, again, I'm sympathetic to it. There are things in my life that I think of as free that in other places aren't necessarily free. I think of water in my rent, where I rent or whatever. Like, I don't get a water bill there too. It's built in somehow. I think of that as free. I think of driving on the highways where I grew up as free because we don't have tolls. Well, they're not on toll on the East Coast. That's not a free public service. That's a produced service. Our expectations about what is valuable is so often informed by the policies in play that build our culture. And right now, I think that when we think about how myself included, when we think about how the free market works, we think, that it's going to function as a meritocracy, essentially, where the cream rise to the crop. And if that's the amount of musicians that can be supported, then that's what the market will bear. I'm not saying there's no truth to it, but that truth is not absolute. When you think about how much of the way that art and music is informed by specific laws, so it had to be made up by specific people. So like the fact that if you're a folk artist, and I'm a folk artist, and I want to cover your song, legally in the US, you can't say no. I can just do it, and I pay you 9.5 cents every time I sell a physical copy of it or whatever it is. So when I covered Bruce Springsteen, there's a fixed rate that was congressionally determined. If you are a hip hop artist, and I'm a hip hop artist, and I want to decide that sampling, that doesn't function the same way at all. People made those. Those are made. That's not a function of the invisible hand of the market. This is not Adam Smith at work. This is people deciding how to build the world.
Yeah.
You know, and so the fact that we have legislated these rules that none of us feel in real time, right? Unless you're actually paying the publisher, you know what I mean, to do it. Like I think we forget that. And so similarly, when we look at what seems to be an unregulated market, right? Like how streaming services run today, most of its competitors are heavily regulated, and yeah, we're not operating in a vacuum without law and the balance of human interest in society.
And I would argue it's not even the music market today is not resemble a free market whatsoever. Because if you're a small business owner who wants to start out either as an independent label or as an artist, the barrier to entry is so high already. And because it's dictated, like you're saying, by the people who write the rules, and in their pursuit of the free market for themselves, they need it for everyone else, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's fascinating. What are your priorities? What would you like to see different about the way we value music? Because obviously the value of music and the way it's reflected in the marketplace, there's a huge dissonance there.
Yeah.
How do you think we bridge that?
I mean, it's weird because in some ways I feel like we value music. And when I say that, I mean it in a moralistic way. We understand a lot of people, not everybody, but I mean, when you go to the average high school in America, like what kind of shirts do you see? You see sports shirts, you see band shirts, you see cartoons, like you see shows. There's a value there. There's a social value. But we're not aligning that with what we're willing to pay for it. And I think in some ways, when I think about like the food systems in the US, like I don't know if it fixed anything, but you could see there was a pressure for a while and a meaningful one. Like, hey, you can buy GMO corn lot fed beef. Or you could see people starting to like pick up the cans and say like, oh, organic. That doesn't tell you the whole story. I know that. But it was like, there was this kind of push for like, for voting with your dollar. And really right now, I should say, I'm the recipient of some of that, so I don't want to discount it. I know and I think the people who have like, I also could download Dessa's record for free. I choose to buy it. But I do think that right now, it's like there's not even a mechanism for that. So if I want to align my spending with my values as a purchaser of groceries, I'm going to go to the food co-op. I'm going to find a local producer. There's a few gestures that I can do. Sure. Some of them actually like sprout to my money or movies. If I want to do that in the music space right now, it's actually really okay. Bandcamp Friday. Yeah. There's, but it's like there are not even that many ways to do it, even if you're willing and interested.
Yeah. And I like your point. I think, like what you're saying, music is valued socially, arguably more than it ever has been. The role that music plays in our lives is greater than it ever has been. I mean, every part of our lives, from driving in the car to hanging out with our friends to going on social media, all of it is based around music. Maybe it's not that we don't value music, but it's that we don't value labor. And that we don't value the labor. I mean, like you're saying, like if your labor was valued more by streaming platforms, then you'd have more creative freedom.
And I do feel this might be valuable only as a metaphor, but in some way, I just do feel like we've started to think about music as this commodity, and by that I mean, of course, we know that there's a different. You like some bands, you don't like others. You think some are underrated, you think some are underrated. But when we were still buying fruits, when Apple price fixed, we didn't have that before. Like, I could pick how much I thought this song was worth. I remember then, and I had written this song later for this record I put out called Chime, and it ends with like a really goofy 45-second songlet. But now all of a sudden, all the songs are equally priced. Well, I would never have sold them for $1.29. Right? There's pressures that the market is exerting, and I think like now that all of us, we probably are listening to music way more. Like, we all have our phones and our headphones. So like, it almost feels like I value clean air, but I never expect to pay for that out of pocket. That's something that is somehow provided to me ethereally. And I feel like right now with music, people are like, I value it. It's super important to me. Art makes me feel connected to other people. But I don't want to actually spend money on that. I want that to be solved in a different way. That's the way that I feel like It's like a faucet. It's like a drinking fountain. Is the expectation that's being developed. I don't know if that expectation has to change or if we do just have to handle compensation in a different way. But yeah, that's the sense that I get too. Which is people value it. They just don't want to pay for it.
So just to come back to streaming revenue, so you make any money off of streaming?
I do make streaming money. I would say I can pay for a phone bill.
Okay.
We have 2 phone bills sometimes.
So like what?
Every quarter.
100,
150.
$150 a quarter?
Yeah, something like that. And I have some good quarters too. I will also say that I felt a boost, which I'm grateful for,
Yeah.
but it's not representative of my career. For some of the kind of income that I earn now per quarter for a song that I recorded for the Hamilton Mixtape.
Oh, sure.
So I'm grateful for it, but it's also just not like I didn't do that work. Do you know what I mean? Like the reason that Hamilton is such a worldwide phenomenon, I'm lucky to have participated in, but I didn't.
Sure. Well, it's interesting. That's a very major label affiliation.
Definitely.
And that's sort of the majority issue.
You know, or a chunk anyway. Yep. And so for me, you know, I think I don't have songs that are licensed very often. I get some like airplay on non-comps and non-commercial channels. It's like The Courage, but I'm aware of it. And as a person who watches movie, I get that like kind of having ambiguous lyrics can make a song flexible enough to fit over someone else's storyline.
Oh, yeah.
And my shit is like, and then an archer went to a prison. I mean, it's just like it's too specific. And so, but that's the music I want to make.
Yeah.
Right? I want, you know, and so it isn't super licensable. It doesn't end up everywhere. You know, it doesn't end up in those places where it might be most compensated in some environment.
But that's also artistic integrity.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And there are people who dig it, right? It's not I'm making such niche music that nobody digs it. If I were compensated in a different way for the people who are enjoying it. 6 million streams last year.
That's a lot. It's a lot of people listening to music.
So many.
Yeah.
So, and like I said, I do enjoy some of these like health recorders at $250 or whatever. Because of this kind of opportunity that I had, which in meaningful ways usually stands apart from the rest of my career. But yeah, it's there. It can be tempting, and I understand what people do. You know, it's like to be persuaded by market forces to make music that they believe in this. Now, granted, sometimes you can do a rad commission because it was cool. Hey, I'm going to just stretch my wings. I'm going to try to do this weird, you know, there's a film I would never usually watch, but I want to, that's cool. That's an artistic thing. But the idea of feeling like what's most important to you artistically, that is also resonating with fans, for some reason can't be fiscally viable because listening isn't how you make money anymore. You've got to find some sort of third party to subsidize it. And that third party very often is someone who you might not otherwise totally want to get into.
Totally. Well, what do you think? How do you think we can, as an artistic music community, start to address these issues?
You know, I wonder, and being my laser being my and me, I'd be curious to hear his answer. But like, I wonder about, you know, groups that try to advocate for indie musicians, like A2IM. If there's a way to say, hey, there is so much value in streaming, we just need to increase the rates. They're just not high enough right now. The model is awesome. The platform is pretty great. Like most of them,
It's
they're
not the technology that's the issue. It's how the structure of it.
exactly. These rates just aren't quite high enough. How do we rectify that? Like in some, it won't be painless, but I don't think that that's fundamentally impossible.
No,
You know,
I don't.
we set minimums price, you know, minimum prices in all sorts of areas of our economy. You know, we subsidize corn, we subsidize soy, we you know, in music when you bought a blank CD, there was a tiny bit of that purchase price that went to ASCAP, or to music publishers. Like, there are rules that we made around this stuff, but we haven't, to my knowledge, legislated any minimum compensation rate per stream for artists.
Well, thank you. Yeah.
Depressing.
But I think it starts with having these conversations. It's how change happens. And I just want to say thank you to you and for such an inspiration to so many people. So
Thanks for the conversation.
yeah, for sure.
Okay, go fix it. You go fix it.